Hello, it's Andrew Eborn here, and thank you so much to everybody who joined us on the inaugural KTT Legacy GSI Bee Gees walk around London. Absolutely sensational. I've got my good chum Mike Read on the phone. Did you survive, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, good walk. You lost 4 stone, and it was good to see you, roughly.
Well, it was good to see me, roughly, always looking rough. Not only did I lose 4 stone, but if you have a look, I'm a rather interesting lobster colour, like my water over here. It's, we spent another 4 days, I think it was, with RJ going around the rest of London. And quite extraordinary. So, but let's have a look at the footage, and maybe you can talk us through some of it.
No worries.
Okay, so Mike, we started off by looking at the fantastic International Broadcasting Corporation on 35 Portland Place. And this was bought by Chaz Chandler and renamed it the Portland Recording Studio. Talk to us about this, because this is the first place where it started as an independent radio broadcasting company, and then later on became these iconic studios.
That's right. Yeah, that Plug started it in 1931, driving across France. He heard various things, and he went into a shop, and they said, "Oh, they've got a little radio station down the road." And when they mentioned us, we had more customers, and he thought, So he founded Independent Broadcasting Company, found a single transmitter out there, started Radio Normandy. Sometimes the programs were bigger than BBC. So he realized the BBC weren't taking advertising. So he started Radio Normandy, which was taking advertising. So he was a very innovative guy. And of course, because people would then come to him from record companies and say, well, actually, if you're taking advertisements, what about taking some money from me to play our record? Later, that would be called payola. But at the time, and they reckon this is where plugging comes from Mr. Plug, who took the money and said, yes, we will do it. So that's where plugging came from, of giving Mr. Plug money to play their music on Radio Normandy.
Oh, fantastic stuff. And I also understand they had some quite iconic, virtually every recording artist that ever there was recorded there, including Lonnie Donegan, who did My Old Man's a Dustman.
Well, yeah, the desk that recorded that is there. I think it's recorded live, but they have the desk in there that actually recorded My Old Man's a Dustman. But yeah, everyone recorded there. One of the great tales for me was PJ Proby. And they had a session. I think Jack Good had a session, and he booked in from 10 until 1 to come in and sing. And the musicians were there. Bobby Graham was the drummer, and Bobby said, we set up an hour, another hour, and we got our typical showbiz not turning up. At 10 to 1, 10 minutes before the end of the session, PJ Proby turned up. And Jack Good said, dear boy, where have you been? He said, the session's 10 to 1. And PJ Proby looked at his watch, he said, it is 10 to 1.
Absolutely glorious. Well, what I also found was glorious, RJ was telling me that actually the Bee Gees, his uncle and his father, Robin, basically they re-recorded a version of My Old Man's a Dustman. Do you remember that? Yeah, so the Bee Gees actually did a version of My Old Man's a Dustman. They recorded that there, which was, I found extraordinary.
Well, I think everybody did. I did one at Air Studios, produced by George Martin, with Right Said Fred backing me.
Oh, brilliant.
So, well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was one of those iconic songs. I mean, and Lonnie was a great influence. I think the Bee Gees would have said that, everybody, the Beatles. Well, not a direct influence, but an influence in a way that you know, you could be Lonnie Donegan, and he was a sort of normal geezer. You could never be Elvis. Elvis was this untouchable star in a pink limousine, a pink Cadillac that looked $1 million and was surrounded by people, you know. But Lonnie was your average bloke you'd see at the stage door. So he made people here believe you could do it. You could get a guitar, strum a few chords, and away you go. So he inspired a generation.
Absolutely amazing. And also, I think the Kinks did, I mean, classic things like You Really Get Me, that was recorded here as well.
Yeah, and all the Slade stuff, of course, because, and Jimi Hendrix, I mean, Chaz looked after Jimi Hendrix. Slade used it a lot of artists down the years, because they get the musicians in, they get all the session musicians in, book them for a session, 10 till 1, 2 till 5, and they come in and they say, well, who are we today? Who are we going to be today? And they laid down all the tracks for all the hits, and people like Bobby Graham that I mentioned, and Clem Cattini played on so many hits for so many artists, because they were so good, they could just come in and do it like that. I mean, and of course, Barry, Robin had Colin Looney playing with them, Colin on drums and Vince on guitar. So they had pretty much a self-contained unit, and their early stuff was produced by Ozzy Byrne, pretty much self-contained in a way.
No, I'm quite remarkable. And also, I mean, lots of classic tracks were recorded there. Lots of the Bee Gees, the original albums, were all recorded there. I think the Tommies from The Who, that was recorded there. So an absolutely iconic studios. And what's sad about it now, I have to say, it's looking a bit dilapidated.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry, I was saying it's a fantastic history of the place, but it's looking a bit dilapidated, look a bit worse for wear.
Yeah, it's probably a bit tired now. I don't know what goes on in there now, but definitely I think that Mr. Plug should maybe have a blue plug. Maybe we should look at that, because he really was a radio pioneer. We talk about the Pirates in the 60s, and we talk about Lord Reith and the BBC. And really, he was, as important as those in his day, and in the 30s and through the 40s. So, yeah, I mean, a very important radio pioneer.
Well, absolutely incredible. And blue plugs, I mean, you're doing a number of those. You've got the iconic ones, which you sorted out with the BBC Music, and we saw a number of those round the sites. How long have you been involved with that side? Oh, you still there, Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's very good. Well, I was just saying, I can hear. I know you're having problems with the signal, but it's the great thing is you were just saying that it needs a bit of tidying up, and you're right. I think it deserves a blue plug, and you have been actively campaigning for a number of these places, including what we're going to see later on at RSO, the Robert Stigwood organisation, and that could do with a bit of tidying up. And the great thing about the plaques which you've organised, they seem to last for a long time. Where do you get those done?
We get them done in Derbyshire, and they're very good. They're the classic past blue plaques, and they should last forever. Really, they don't need any cleaning. They need looking after, but they do commemorate people who've done something very special and something unique in their particular genre, whatever it is. Whether it's music, science, politics, sport, whatever. Somebody has contributed something unique to the country, and I think in that instance at IBC that's certainly the case. It is worth looking at. So a good prompt, that I think.
No, absolutely, and very good. We're now outside the Langham Hotel. Now, famously, the Bee Gees and I'm sure lots of other stars did all of their interviews at the Langham, just over the road from the BBC. What do you remember about the Langham Hotel?
Well, the Langham's been there for a long time as a hotel. It has a plaque on the wall because Oscar Wilde and Arthur Conan Doyle had the same publisher, and they published it.
And it's currently closed at the moment because of obviously the virus, but I think a lot of places they're hoping on July the 4th, Independence Day, they're going to be able to unlock all of that to have a look at that sort of side. But it's got one of the most famous cocktail bars in the whole of Europe, the fantastic Langham Hotel. And I know that RJ and I have been there several times after a late night before he goes off to Tame and I go back to my place at Regent's Park. Did you used to pop along here in your Radio 1 days? Are you still here, Mike? And what was really interesting is that after we went to the fantastic Langham Hotel, we popped over the road to the BBC, the home of British broadcasting. And obviously the Bee Gees, for a very long time, have been recording not just their albums on the radio shows, they were regulars on Mike's radio show, but also we were looking at different principles for the other aspects as well, the TV shows that we had a look at. And we spoke at length about the great TV shows here on the BBC. And what used to happen is they would pop over, do a recording here, and then pop along to the Langham Hotel to see what was going on there. And for many years, we were not only doing the radio shows, but popping on and having lots of fun on Top of the Pops with Mike Read DJing. And we also had Mike Read was doing the breakfast show at that stage. So, and things like Pop Quiz were topping the charts with millions upon millions of viewers. So you join us right here outside the BBC, the home of British broadcasting. And we're just passing all our way through here now. And you can see that this is where Radio 1 is. And Radio 1 and Radio 2 and the various other stations are all broadcasting from that side. So each of these are iconic moments within BG's history. And just around the corner from the main broadcasting house, we have the BBC Club, which was renamed Wogan House in honour of the legendary broadcaster Terry Wogan. And this is where the great, the good, the unwashed, all the celebrities, having broadcast that sweaty, sweaty job they have to do, they would then pop along to the BBC Club. And this is the appropriately named Wogan House. And we can just pop in here. You can see everybody working extremely hard, socially distancing, a nice warm welcome. And many's the year that various celebrities would be popping along there to chat about things after the recordings. And so we're now leaving the BBC. We're walking past Langham Hotel and have just passed All Souls, where many of our relatives actually got married. My grandfather married my grandmother in All Souls Hotel. And we're just walking down, this is North Regent Street. And as you can see, London itself is fairly quiet during this time. And even though we've seen many shops have said that they're opening up, the reality is that Londoners are not coming back into London. They're staying away. And we've popped in on KTT in association with GSI. We've popped into many of the different stores to have a look and to see what's going on. Because you see different reports on the news about how many crowds, people worried about social distancing, and so on and so forth. And the reality is that it is safer in London. We've now reduced the social distancing from 2 meters to 1 meter where it's not possible. And so people should come out, come and join us. Because right here, for example, is the very first cinema, which was opened in 1848. It's called the Regent Street Cinema. And it's the birthplace of British cinema. This is the plaque for Pink Floyd, who between 1962 and 1966, Nick Mason, Roger Waters, and Richard Wright, they studied at Regent Street Polytechnic, and that's where they first formed the band. And you can have a look here. As I say, this is the Regent Street Cinema, which was opened all the way back in 1848, and it's the birthplace of British cinema. And one of the great reports, which I loved, was hearing of the people who ran out in absolute terror when they saw the first ever movie, because it was a movie of a train coming towards them in the audience. And the people who'd never seen the cinema before, never seen a film, they were so scared, it looked so real, that they ran out of the cinema screaming. We're now making our way from Regent Street Cinema and the glorious experiences that we had there. And we're going to be making our way to 48 Margaret Street. And as many of you will know, that 48 Margaret Street was the site of the Speak Easy Cafe, which was an infamous rock venue. Careful as we cross the road. You're joining us live here on behalf of KTT. We're looking back down. You can see that the streets of London themselves are fairly empty at the moment, even though we've been talking about people coming back. People are social distancing. But if you look at the shops, there's not that many people around. And we've popped into Hamleys already. This is Margaret Street. And Margaret Street in London, W1, W8SE. And you can wander on foot to yourself. All of these venues, which I'm taking you to, are accessible. And the great thing is that you yourself can join in. You can come along. There's 47 to 50. We're looking for 48. So it's right bang in the middle of those. And this is the site of the Speakeasy Club, which is an infamous rock venue. You can see it's actually available to let now. There you go. The prime A1 unit. And what they forgot to tell you is it's got an amazing rich history. Now, the Speak itself opened in 1966, and it became well known as a late night drinking club. There were many customers who associated it with the music industry, and you had everybody from roadies all the way through to the Beatles. The Who are basically included in Radio London, Speakeasy, Roto Sound Strings commercial, insert for their Sellout album in 1967. It also hosted performances by some of the finest acts of the time. Jimi Hendrix performed there, for example. Deep Purple performed there. We also had Bob Marley, David Bowie, and King Crimson, who debuted at the club. We spoke beforehand to my great chum, Toya, and she's married to Robert Fripp. But most important of all, 48 Margaret Street, the Speakeasy Club, was the site of the very first promo film made for the Bee Gees of New York mining disaster 1941. So check that out. That's the Speakeasy Club on 48 Margaret Street. And as you see, we've popped into one of the main retail stores here in London. This is the Nike store, and play on, stay active. But if you have a look round, the extraordinary thing is that it's still empty. And many of these stores, in spite of what the news is telling everybody, are sort of turning around and saying, okay, come. We've all got everything sorted. Some of the news reports show that there are massive queues. Well, we're live here on Oxford Street in the busiest shopping centre in the world, and it is deserted. It is the most extraordinary sight. And site after site after site we visited, and we've seen the same thing. This is Oxford Street. I can show you both ways. That's me talking. And now you join us on Argyle Street. And Argyle Street, as many of you will know, is the home of the 2,208 seat, fantastic Grade 2 West End building known as the Palladium, which you can see in front of us now. This is a really famous area of London known as Soho, and the roster of stars, it's a whole galaxy of stars who have played at the Palladium. And many televised performances have been here. And whilst the theatre has a residence show, it's able to host one-off performances, such as concerts and TV specials. And for example, it's hosted the Royal Variety performance no less than 43 times, most recently in 2019. And I've had the real honour of going to the Royal Variety performance with my very good friend who's the treasurer of the Royal Variety Club. And they raise money, not least for Brinsworth House, for people in the profession can spend their last twilight years in Brinsworth House. And my mother actually went there. It's a fantastic place, fantastic staff, and a shout out to all the care homes and people who are doing that at the moment. Extra difficult times. But Argyle Street and the Bee Gees themselves, there's a rich history of the Palladium. In 1973, they had their first concert there, but they also had the press conference for Saturday Night Fever, and the musical world premiere of Saturday Night Fever took place at the London Palladium. And perhaps most emotionally of all, this was the very last performance of Robin Gibb. So you can see those are the different streets, wandering all the way round, and over there on the way back, you can see everywhere is still shockingly deserted. So you do come down, because the only thing that's missing is you. This is quite extraordinary. This is Carnaby Street in the heart of London, the heart of one of the biggest places in the world. I can show you on the map. I always like to do this so you can see you are here. There you go. And you can see we're right in the heart of Carnaby Street in Soho. There's that amazing artwork. I have a very similar one to that in the center of Tokyo, just outside the Dentsu building. Fantastic organization, Dentsu. And they do lots of the major advertising campaigns. They're heavily investing in movies. And I've had the joy of working with them for several years. And number 5 Carnaby Street was in fact the offices of the tailor, John Stephen. Now, John Stephen used to dress the brothers. In particular, he dressed Barry, earning Barry the title of the best dressed man. And John and Barry went back a long, long way. John Stephen was the famous tailor who was known as the £1 million mod, the £1 million mod, or the king of Carnaby Street. And he said that basically Carnaby Street, and he's probably right, Carnaby Street is my creation. I feel about it the same way as Michelangelo felt about the beautiful statues he created. We are now on Brook Street, and Brook Street is the home of Robert Stigwood. Number 67 Brook Street is where he had his home and where the Bee Gees wrote many of their hits. Robert Stigwood was obviously the Bee Gees manager and producer, and spent much of the time with the Bee Gees. There's the plaque put up by the City of Westminster. The Bee Gees, Barry, Robin and Maurice Gibb, composed and stayed here 1968 to 1980. And that was put up by the Heritage Foundation in recognition of the importance of 67 Brook Street, Mayfair, London W1K 4NJ. And they were one of the biggest acts, obviously, of the 1970s. And they provided the soundtrack of a generation. As many of you know, the Bee Gees won multiple Grammy Awards during their massive career, which spanned 35 years and continues to this day. Now, Robin used to say that this location meant a great deal to the brothers because it's somewhere where they wrote a lot of their songs. And he also pointed out that in addition to being a celebration of the band's music and achievement, the Green Plaque was also a special memorial to Maurice, who had died in 2003 and was not able to see that. The Bee Gees were also inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that was in 1997. They've sold more than 200 million records worldwide, and in the top 5 of the most successful recording artists of all time, together with Elvis, the Beatles, Sir Paul McCartney, and Michael Jackson. And it's perhaps poignant that today, the 25th of June, is the anniversary of the passing of Michael, who died on the 25th of June 2009. And the brothers had a particular strong relationship with him. And RJ was telling us about the special relationship that Michael Jackson enjoyed with the brothers and what pranks he would get up to. And he talked about how Michael would come surprise them by turning up with all his bodyguards unannounced in that wonderful, mischievous way that Michael did. Michael was also quite a regular visitor to London. He would go to Hamley's toy store, and we saw today that Hamley's was virtually empty, just as I pointed out in previous videos. London is indeed open and looking for customers, so we're looking for you to come along and do. The weather is absolutely glorious. And I think you'll find that that's probably one of the reasons that my water matches my eyes, which is the colour of my complexion now. It's all been absolutely incredible. But I toast all of you, thank you so much for joining me on what has been a marathon tour. These particular visits have been chopped into different sections, so you can enjoy those. In later episodes, we go down to the Bomber Command Memorial, right there on Hyde Park Corner, where Robin tirelessly campaigned to have that. And we hear Mike Read talking about the Bomber Command and the action which was taken to get that memorial erected. We also hear from RJ Gibb, the son of Robin Gibb, and also who's a legendary producer, raconteur, mentalist, an all-round good egg, and my partner in KTT, Not the Truth, where our job is to basically build on the legacy, to keep his father's legacy alive, but also to act as a platform for new artists and for RJ's own musical creations. But today, this has been a special day. It's brought to you on behalf of KTT and on behalf of GSI and the fantastic work that Marion does. And thank you to all of the fans. This was a little bit of an experiment, if you like. It started because Marion's been watching me on my daily walks as I walk through London, exploring what's going on in this fantastic city and seeing London opening up after lockdown for several weeks. And what we've discovered is this, is that many stores, many of the largest department stores in the world are indeed opening up. They've taken precautionary measures to make sure that it is safe for customers. But the reality is, unfortunately, people have not yet started to make their way back. So my message today, if ever there was a message, is that London is open for business. I've been walking these streets in a positive way, looking at the wonderful things associated with the Bee Gees. And you'll be able to see long versions of those walks. You can follow me in real time as I walk down to the memorial, the Bomber Memorial, which we talked about. As I walk down to Shaftesbury Avenue, the iconic places there. As I took you on a journey all the way through Westminster, we saw Westminster Abbey, we saw Westminster Hall, where the Titanic Requiem was played. I also took you to the starting place with the recording studios on Portland Street, where they recorded many of their albums and many of their fantastic singles. We also went to the Langham Hotel, and you can see where many of the interviews took place. The brothers would do their interviews in the Langham Hotel, and also go there after a recording at the BBC, which we also went to, which is right next door, both the television centre and also the radio stations. And Mike Read used to do the breakfast show for Radio 1 and spent many, many happy years at Radio 1, as well as on television, doing programmes such as Pop Quiz and Saturday Superstore, gaining millions upon millions of viewers every single week. Times have changed, but nostalgia ain't what it used to be, which is why we are here doing what we're doing. It's important that we tell the tales. You get people who are still around, who can tell us about the exploits at the Speakeasy Club, who can tell us about their time at the Regent Cinema, the Regent Street Cinema, and the very first movies that were there, and the plaque we saw for Pink Floyd. And we get raconteurs who can tell us about the time at the Palladium, and also at the time, the wonderful characters that used to live at Carnaby Street. All of that and a lot more in all of these episodes. So I would urge you, do subscribe to Octopus TV. It's free. My favorite four-letter word, beginning with F. It's free, F-R-E-E. Get down there now. Go and subscribe on YouTube. Go over to Daily Motion and make sure you follow us there. You can stalk us on every single platform. And we're also trying to do things in an experimental way with KTT. We want to bring access direct and live and in an uncensored way. But it's also dictated and motivated by you. So if you'd like to be in touch, you can write to me at ktt@octopustv.com. And I promise you that we will listen and we'll try to bring you what you really want. But for me, Andrew Eborn, it's been an extraordinary day. I'm looking a lot redder and probably a lot trimmer after my 7.5 hours on the road bringing you this content. I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Lots of love. Bye.